The moment my mother's eyes met mine across the polished mahogany table, a shiver, cold and sharp as a winter's blade, ran down my spine. It wasn't the familiar warmth I craved, but a calculating glint, a silent promise of something sinister. My name is Eleanor Vance, and for years I believed in the unwavering love of family, the kind that built empires and survived storms. I poured my heart, soul, and every cent I earned into creating a sanctuary, a breathtaking villa nestled on the sun-drenched coast of California, a place I envisioned as our family's legacy. This wasn't just any property. It was my dream, purchased with the sweat of my brow, a testament to decades of relentless work in the cutthroat world of corporate law. Every tile, every plant, every custom-built piece of furniture whispered my name, a monument to my independence. Then came the day I discovered her betrayal, a deception so profound it ripped the very fabric of my reality. What if I told you that in just a few minutes, you'll witness how a mother, driven by a twisted sense of favoritism, could systematically dismantle one daughter's life to elevate another. This isn't just a story about a house, it's about the crushing weight of a mother's preference, the invisible scars it leaves, and the lengths one woman will go to reclaim what was stolen. Everyone thinks family ties are unbreakable, a sacred bond. But what happens when that bond is weaponized, used as a tool for manipulation and theft? The first hint of trouble wasn't a dramatic explosion, but a quiet, insidious erosion. My sister, Clara, always the golden child, always the one my mother coddled, started spending more and more time at my villa. At first, I welcomed it. I thought it was a sign of closeness, a shared joy in the beauty I had created. I'd send her photos, excited about new landscaping, new artwork, oblivious to the insidious plot unfolding beneath my very nose. I was busy, consumed by a high-stakes case, often traveling for weeks, trusting my family to care for my sanctuary. That trust, I would soon learn, was a luxury I could not afford. The unsettling feeling grew with each passing month. Calls to my mother became curt, evasive. Clara's presence at the villa morphed from a guest into something more permanent. I started noticing small, jarring changes. A piece of furniture moved, a garden bed replanted in a way I hadn't approved, a familiar painting replaced. Each instance, a tiny prick, easily dismissed as a misunderstanding, but cumulatively, they began to form a pattern, a chilling mosaic of encroachment. I dismissed the creeping unease, telling myself I was overreacting, that family would never betray me. Oh, how wrong I was. The true nightmare began when I returned home after securing a monumental victory for my firm, ready to celebrate. The villa, my beloved retreat, no longer felt like mine. Clara greeted me with a proprietary air, her smile too wide, her eyes holding a glint of triumph I couldn't quite decipher. My mother arrived shortly after, her demeanor unusually stiff, her gaze avoiding mine. The air was thick with unspoken tension, a silent scream building in my chest. Then, she dropped the bombshell, a statement delivered with a chilling calm that still echoes in my nightmares. Eleanor, your sister needs a place to live. I've decided to transfer the villa's ownership to Clara. The words hung in the air, shattering the silence, piercing my very soul. My villa? Transferred? To Clara? My mind reeled, grasping for logic, for a reason, for any explanation beyond outright malice. This wasn't a request. It was a pronouncement, delivered as if it were a minor household update, not the destruction of my life's work. The sheer audacity, the cold-blooded disregard for my feelings, for my sacrifice, left me breathless. I felt a surge of raw, volcanic anger, a betrayal so profound it threatened to consume me. This wasn't just about property. It was about a lifetime of being second best, of constantly striving for a mother's approval that was always bestowed upon Clara. My carefully constructed world imploded in that single, horrifying moment. The rage that simmered beneath the surface for decades finally ignited, promising a reckoning. But what I was about to discover what my mother had meticulously hidden, would twist the knife even deeper, exposing a network of lies far more intricate and devastating than I could ever imagine. You won't believe what happened next when I finally got my hands on the inheritance papers. The air in the courtroom hung heavy, a suffocating blanket of anticipation and dread. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence that followed the judge's final words. "The court rules in favor of the plaintiff," he declared, his voice echoing the death knell of my dreams. A gasp escaped my lips, but it was swallowed by the triumphant smirk that spread across my sister Sarah's face. Beside her, my mother, Eleanor, offered a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval. The villa, the home I had poured my life savings into, the sanctuary I had envisioned for my future, was gone. It was hers now, or rather, Sarah's. I stood there, rooted to the spot, a hollow ache blooming in my chest. My name is Amelia, and for 20 years I had believed in the unwavering love of my family. That day, in that sterile courtroom, that belief shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The judge's gavel struck, a final, brutal punctuation mark on the end of my innocence. Sarah, my younger sister, the one I had always protected, the one I had put through college, now looked at me with an icy indifference that cut deeper than any legal ruling. Eleanor, my mother, who had always preached about family unity, stood by, a silent accomplice in this calculated betrayal. Outside the courthouse, the Los Angeles sun beat down, but I felt a chilling cold seep into my bones. The vibrant city, usually a source of endless energy, now seemed to mock my despair. I clutched my purse, my knuckles white, the legal documents inside feeling like a death warrant. This wasn't just about a property. It was about a lifetime of subtle slights, of being overlooked, of being the dependable one while Sarah, the golden child, reaped the rewards. This villa, my villa, was the culmination of my relentless hard work, my sacrifices, my unwavering dedication to a future I believed I was building for myself. I had worked 2 jobs for years, saved every spare dime, meticulously planned every detail of the renovation, imagining quiet evenings on the terrace, the scent of jasmine filling the air. Now, those dreams were Sarah's to inhabit. The memory of Eleanor's words still stung, a venomous whisper in my mind. "Amelia, darling, you're so good with money. Sarah needs a little help, you know how impulsive she can be." That was her constant refrain, a subtle manipulation that had always positioned me as the responsible one, the one who should always give. I had bought into it, hook, line, and sinker, for decades. I had always been the one to bail Sarah out of financial scrapes, to lend an ear to her endless dramas, to be the steady anchor in her turbulent life. But this was a betrayal of a magnitude I never thought possible. They hadn't just taken my property, they had stripped away my trust, my sense of belonging, my very identity within the family. I walked the bustling streets of downtown LA, the throngs of people a blur around me, their laughter and conversations just a meaningless din. My mind replayed the events leading up to this devastating day. Eleanor had approached me months ago, her voice laced with concern, claiming Sarah was in dire financial straits, facing eviction from her apartment. She'd painted a picture of Sarah's desperation, her fragile mental state, her inability to cope. Eleanor had suggested a temporary solution. I could transfer the villa's title to Sarah's name for a short period, just to help her secure a loan, a gesture of sisterly love. "It's just on paper, Amelia," Eleanor had assured me, her eyes wide and earnest. "You know it's still yours, of course. Just a formality." Fool that I was, I had believed her. The ink on the transfer papers had barely dried before Sarah's attitude shifted. Her calls became less frequent, her tone colder. Then came the eviction notice, not for Sarah, but for me, from the very home I had purchased. The legal battle that ensued was a brutal, drawn-out affair, a public airing of my family's deepest dysfunction. Sarah, with Eleanor's unwavering support, had claimed the villa was a gift, a generous act from a loving sister. They had produced carefully crafted emails, text messages taken out of context, and even a handwritten note from Eleanor, implying the villa was always intended for Sarah. Each piece of evidence was a calculated dagger to my heart. The resentment that had simmered beneath the surface for years now boiled over, a raging inferno consuming everything in its path. It wasn't just about the money, though that was a significant part of it. It was about the emotional manipulation, the audacious deceit, the sheer cruelty of it all. They had played me for a fool, and the sting of that realization was far more painful than any financial loss. As I stared at the endless stream of cars on the freeway, a new resolve began to harden within me. This wasn't just a setback, it was a declaration of war. They had underestimated Amelia, the quiet, dependable one. They had no idea the fire they had just ignited. This wasn't over. This was only the beginning. The bitter taste of injustice lingered, a constant companion as I navigated the familiar streets of Los Angeles. Every billboard, every gleaming car, every smiling face felt like a taunt. They had stolen not just a house, but a piece of my future, a symbol of everything I had worked for. That initial shock had given way to a simmering rage, a quiet fire beneath my skin. I wasn't just hurt anymore, I was furious. My mother, Eleanor, and my sister Sarah had orchestrated this betrayal with a chilling precision that still made my stomach churn. I replayed the courtroom scene endlessly, dissecting Sarah's triumphant smirk, my mother's almost imperceptible nod. It was a calculated move, a cold, deliberate act. I spent the next few weeks in a haze, the world around me a blur of meaningless activity. My apartment, once a cozy sanctuary, now felt like a temporary holding cell. I couldn't focus at work, my mind constantly drifted back to the villa, to the dreams I had painted within its walls. I saw Sarah hosting lavish parties there, laughing with my mother, completely oblivious to the wreckage they had left in their wake. The thought fueled a new, dangerous obsession within me. I needed to understand why. Why had they done this? What had I ever done to deserve such a cruel public humiliation? One evening, unable to sleep, I found myself rifling through old boxes, searching for something, anything, that might offer a clue. I stumbled upon a dusty photo album from my childhood, pictures of Sarah and me, arms around each other, beaming the camera. Pictures of Eleanor, her smile warm and genuine, holding both of us close. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. Nostalgia, pain, and a fresh surge of anger. How could the woman in those photographs become the accomplice in my ruin? How could my sister, Sarah, the girl I had once shared secrets and dreams with, turn into a stranger capable of such malice? The realization dawned on me slowly, chilling me to the bone. This wasn't just about the villa. This was about a lifetime of being the other daughter, the dependable one, the one who always understood. While Sarah was showered with praise and attention, I was expected to simply be there. I had always dismissed it as sibling dynamics, a mother's natural favoritism. But now, it felt like a deliberate strategy, a slow erosion of my worth, culminating in this ultimate act of dispossession. They hadn't just taken my property, they had tried to erase me. My focus sharpened. This was no longer just about recovering what was mine. It was about exposing the truth, about making them face the consequences of their actions. I started digging, quietly at first. I spoke to old family friends, distant relatives, anyone who might have witnessed the subtle shifts in family dynamics over the years. Many offered platitudes, expressing sympathy for my loss, but few had any real insight. They saw only the surface, the picture-perfect family Eleanor had always presented to the world. Then, an unexpected call came from an old acquaintance of my father's, a retired lawyer named Mr. Henderson. He had heard about the court case through the grapevine and expressed his condolences. During our conversation, he casually mentioned something that sent a jolt through me. "Your father, bless his soul, was always a meticulous man," he remarked. He had a way of planning for everything, even after he was gone. The words hung in the air, sparking a flicker of hope in the darkness. My father had passed away suddenly a decade ago, leaving behind a modest inheritance that Eleanor had managed. I had never questioned it. The next day, I found myself at Mr. Henderson's office, a small, unassuming space filled with towering stacks of legal tomes. He remembered my father fondly, speaking of his integrity and foresight. He then pulled out a faded manila folder, its contents yellowed with age. "Your father had a deep love for both his daughters, Amelia," he said, his voice soft. "He always wanted to ensure you both were cared for." My heart pounded as he slid a document across the desk. It was my father's original will, a document I had never seen before. Eleanor had always maintained that the previous will, the one that left everything to her, was the only one. As I read through the dense legal jargon, a cold dread began to mingle with a surge of adrenaline. There, clearly stated, was a clause I had never known existed. A trust fund, established specifically for Sarah, to be dispersed upon her 30th birthday, provided she demonstrated financial independence. And then, a separate provision, outlining that the Los Angeles villa, the very one I had lost, was to be held in my name, Amelia, as a direct inheritance, free and clear, from the moment of his passing. My mother had been the executor of his estate. She had known about this. Sarah had known. They had not only taken my villa, they had actively concealed my father's true wishes. The betrayal ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. This wasn't just about greed. It was about a calculated, decade-long deception. The truth, finally revealed, felt like a punch to the gut, but it also ignited a fierce, unyielding resolve. My mother and Sarah had just made a very powerful enemy. The realization hit me like a physical blow, a cold, hard knot forming in the pit of my stomach. My father, the man I adored, the one who had always seen me, truly seen me, had left me this villa. Not just any villa, but this villa, the one I had poured my soul into, the one my mother and Sarah had so ruthlessly stolen. The inheritance papers, now clutched in my trembling hand, laid bare a truth so profound, so devastating, it rearranged my entire perception of my family. He hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't favored Sarah. He had explicitly named me as the sole inheritor of his beloved coastal property. This wasn't some minor oversight. This was an active, malicious concealment of his last wishes. My mind reeled, piecing together fragments of memories, conversations, and subtle glances from years past. I remembered my father's quiet pride when I spoke of my dreams for a home by the ocean. His knowing smile when I showed him architectural sketches. He'd always encouraged my independence, my ambition. Now, it all made sense. He hadn't just intended to leave me the villa. He had nurtured my dream, knowing he would make it a reality. And my mother, Eleanor, with Sarah as her willing accomplice, had systematically dismantled that reality, brick by painful brick. The anger that had simmered beneath the surface since the court ruling now erupted into a raging inferno. It wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about a lifetime of manipulation, of being played for a fool. My father's will was crystal clear, notarized and filed years ago, long before his passing. How could they have hidden this? How could a mother so casually disregard her deceased husband's final testament, especially when it concerned her own daughter? The answer, I realized with a sickening lurch, lay in their insatiable greed and their twisted sense of entitlement. Sarah had always been the favored child, showered with gifts and opportunities I had to fight for. This villa, in their eyes, was just another one of Sarah's due entitlements, regardless of who truly owned it. I spent the next few days in a haze, the inheritance papers spread across my small apartment table, each clause, each signature, a searing indictment of my family. I reread them countless times, searching for any loophole, any ambiguity, anything that could possibly justify their actions. There was nothing. The language was unambiguous, my name boldly printed as the rightful owner. The legal battle I had just lost was a sham, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to dispossess me. They had known all along. My mother and Sarah had walked into that courtroom, fully aware of my father's true wishes, and lied, manipulated, and conspired to steal what was rightfully mine. The immediate aftermath of this discovery was a blur of righteous fury. I paced my apartment, phone in hand, rehearsing conversations, imagining confrontations. I wanted to march straight to their door, wave the papers in their faces, and watch their smug expressions crumble. But a deeper, colder part of me cautioned restraint. This wasn't a game of emotional outbursts. This was a war, and I had just uncovered their Achilles heel. They had underestimated me, dismissed me as the easily manipulated older sister. They had believed their deception was foolproof. They were wrong. My first call wasn't to a lawyer. It was to an old college friend, Mark, a brilliant investigative journalist known for his relentless pursuit of truth and his uncanny ability to unearth hidden secrets. I needed more than legal recourse. I needed exposure. I needed the world, or at least our small, interconnected social sphere, to see my mother and Sarah for who they truly were. Mark listened patiently, his usual journalistic cynicism replaced by genuine shock as I recounted the details, the courtroom drama, and finally, the damning inheritance papers. He understood immediately the depth of the betrayal, the human interest angle, the potential for a scandal that would rock their carefully constructed facade. "Amelia," he said, his voice grave, "this is huge. This isn't just about a villa. This is about fraud, about a family tearing itself apart over money, and about a mother betraying her own child. We need to be meticulous. We need every piece of evidence, every detail, every conversation you can recall. This isn't going to be a quick fight, but when we're done, they won't know what hit them." His words ignited a spark of hope, a flicker of light in the darkness that had enveloped me. I wasn't alone. I had an ally, a professional who understood the stakes and possessed the tools to fight back. The initial shock gave way to a cold, calculated determination. My mother and Sarah had made a formidable enemy, an enemy armed with the truth and a growing network of support. The emotional pain was still raw, but it was now channeled into a singular, unwavering purpose: justice. I would reclaim what was mine, not just the villa, but my dignity, my father's memory, and the truth they had so cruelly buried. This was no longer just about property, it was about exposing the rot at the heart of my family, and I was ready to meticulously unravel every thread of their deceit. The chill of the courtroom had long since faded, replaced by a burning resolve that fueled my every waking moment. I spent countless nights poring over old financial records, dusty photographs, and forgotten letters. Each document was a piece of a puzzle, slowly revealing the intricate web of deception my mother Eleanor and my sister Sarah had spun. The villa was merely the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lay a history of manipulation far deeper than I had ever imagined. My father, a kind and trusting man, had been systematically exploited, his generosity twisted into a weapon against his own children. I remembered the day I found my father's old desk in the attic, gathering dust. A forgotten key in a velvet pouch led to a hidden compartment. Inside, nestled amongst his faded journals, was a small, leather-bound ledger. It wasn't just a record of his business dealings. It was a chronicle of his life, interwoven with meticulous notes about his estate planning. He had always been so careful, so precise. This ledger, unlike anything I had seen before, detailed his true intentions for his inheritance. It spoke of trusts, of beneficiaries, of specific allocations that starkly contradicted the official will presented in court. My hands trembled as I read, a cold dread seeping into my heart. My father had explicitly outlined a significant portion of his estate for me, a portion far greater than what the current will dictated. He had even detailed conditions for Sarah's inheritance, conditions that she clearly had not met. The ledger also contained entries about a substantial life insurance policy, one that had seemingly vanished after his death. This wasn't just a simple oversight, this was outright fraud, a deliberate act to disinherit me and enrich Sarah. The names of the lawyers, the dates, the amounts. It was all there, laid bare in my father's familiar, elegant script. A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about my father's legacy, his final wishes, desecrated by the very people he loved. Eleanor, my mother, had orchestrated this. The thought was a bitter pill to swallow, a betrayal so profound it threatened to shatter my very foundation. How could the woman who raised me, who taught me right from wrong, commit such a heinous act? The answer, I realized, lay in her unwavering favoritism toward Sarah, a favoritism that had now morphed into something truly monstrous. I found myself pacing my small apartment, the ledger clutched in my hand, the weight of its revelations pressing down on me. I needed proof, undeniable evidence that would stand up in court. The ledger was powerful, but I knew Eleanor and Sarah would try to discredit it, to claim it was a fabrication. I needed more. I began to dig deeper into the timelines, cross-referencing dates from the ledger with other documents I had. I discovered discrepancies in the dates of certain asset transfers, signatures that looked suspiciously altered, and bank statements that showed large, unexplained withdrawals shortly after my father's passing. The more I uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Eleanor had systematically siphoned off funds, manipulated legal documents, and ultimately rewritten my father's will to ensure Sarah received the lion's share. The villa was just one piece of a much larger, more elaborate scheme. My father's life insurance policy, worth millions, had been cashed out and the proceeds funneled into accounts controlled by Eleanor, with Sarah as a secondary beneficiary. This wasn't just greed. It was a calculated, years-long campaign of financial abuse against my own father, culminating in my disinheritance. I contacted a new lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Miss Davies, known for her tenacity in inheritance disputes. I laid out everything, the ledger, the discrepancies, the altered documents. She listened intently, her expression hardening with each new piece of information. "This is significant, Amelia," she finally said, her voice low and serious. "This isn't just about challenging a will. This is about exposing a criminal conspiracy. Your mother and sister could face serious charges." The words hung in the air, heavy with consequence. My own family facing prison. The thought was chilling, yet a fierce sense of justice burned within me. Ms. Davies immediately initiated a new legal process, a full forensic audit of my father's estate. The legal letters began flying, each one a direct hit to the comfortable facade my mother and Sarah had built. I could almost feel their panic, their carefully constructed world beginning to crack under the pressure. I imagined the frantic phone calls, the whispered conversations, the dawning realization that their deceit was finally catching up to them. I knew this would be a brutal fight, but I was no longer the naive sister, the overlooked daughter. I was Amelia, and I was coming for what was mine, not just the money but the truth, and the vindication of my father's memory. The storm was brewing and I was ready to unleash its full fury. The air in the courtroom crackled with an electricity I had never felt before. It wasn't the suffocating dread of before, but a charged anticipation, a sense of impending release. My heart still thrummed, but now it was a rhythm of defiance, not despair. I watched Amelia, my sister, as she took the stand. Her face, usually a mask of weary resignation, now held a steely resolve that surprised even me. She began to speak, her voice clear and strong, recounting the years of subtle manipulations, the financial drain, the emotional toll our mother Eleanor and I had exacted. Each word was a precise, calculated blow, landing with devastating accuracy. I felt a cold dread begin to seep into my own bones, a mirror to the feeling Amelia had described experiencing outside the courthouse after the initial verdict. I glanced at Eleanor. Her usually composed features were starting to fray at the edges, a tremor in her hands as she clutched her purse. The confident smirk I had worn during the first trial had long since vanished, replaced by a growing unease. Amelia wasn't just recounting events, she was weaving a tapestry of systematic emotional abuse and financial exploitation, a narrative so compelling it was impossible to ignore. She spoke of how I had always been the favored child, how every whim of mine was indulged, often at Amelia's expense. She detailed the loans I had received, never repaid, the lavish gifts, the constant need for financial assistance that Eleanor had always covered, always from the shared inheritance that was meant for both of us. Then came the bombshell. Amelia produced bank statements, meticulously organized, showing a clear pattern of transfers from our father's trust, directly into my accounts, authorized by Eleanor. Not just a few thousand here and there, but substantial sums, enough to fund my extravagant lifestyle, my failed business ventures, and yes, even the down payment on the very villa we were now fighting over. The courtroom gasped. The judge, who had seemed impassive during the initial proceedings, now leaned forward, his expression grave. Eleanor's face went ashen. She tried to interrupt, a choked cry escaping her lips, but Amelia's lawyer, a sharp, unyielding woman, silenced her with a stern look. Amelia continued, her voice unwavering. She presented emails, texts, even recorded phone calls, evidence I hadn't even known she possessed, where Eleanor explicitly discussed how to legally bypass Amelia's claim to the inheritance, how to ensure I received the lion's share. The carefully constructed facade of family loyalty, of maternal love, shattered into a million pieces before everyone's eyes. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just about the villa anymore, it was about the systematic dismantling of our family's entire history, a public exhibition of Eleanor's favoritism and my own complicity. I had always known I was favored, but I had rationalized it, convinced myself it was simply because I needed more help, that Amelia was more independent. Now, the cold, hard facts laid bare the truth. It was a deliberate, calculated act of betrayal against Amelia. My own lawyer, a man who had exuded confidence just moments before, now looked utterly defeated. He whispered frantically to me, urging me to settle, to cut my losses. But what was there left to settle? The villa, the very symbol of my perceived victory, now felt like a poisoned chalice. It wasn't mine through honest means. It was stolen, piece by piece, from Amelia. The weight of my actions, of Eleanor's actions, pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. I had always seen Amelia as the bitter one, the one who couldn't let go of the past. Now, I saw her as the wronged one, systematically stripped of her birthright, while I, the undeserving sister, reaped the rewards. The cross-examination was brutal. Amelia's lawyer tore through Eleanor's testimony, exposing every lie, every half-truth. Eleanor, usually so poised, crumbled under the relentless questioning. Her voice cracked, her answers became evasive, and eventually, she broke down, tears streaming down her face as she admitted to manipulating the inheritance, to favoring me, to actively working against Amelia's interests. The courtroom was silent, save for Eleanor's sobs. It was a moment of raw, unvarnished truth, a public confession that echoed through the hallowed halls of justice. Then came my turn. I was called to the stand, my legs feeling like lead. The confident, entitled persona I had cultivated for years had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow shell. Amelia looked at me, her eyes devoid of hatred, but filled with a profound sadness that cut me to the core. Her gaze was a mirror, reflecting back every selfish act, every thoughtless word, every moment I had taken her for granted. I tried to maintain my composure, to deny, to deflect, but the weight of the evidence, the undeniable truth of Amelia's testimony, crushed me. I found myself stammering, contradicting myself, my carefully constructed defenses crumbling around me. The judge's gavel finally fell, not with the triumphant finality of the first ruling, but with a quiet, solemn resonance. He declared the previous verdict overturned, citing overwhelming evidence of fraud and undue influence. The villa, he decreed, was to be returned to Amelia, along with substantial financial compensation from the manipulated trust. A collective sigh rippled through the courtroom. I stood there, numb, the word fraud echoing in my ears. It wasn't just a legal term, it was a label. A brand, seared onto my very being. The villa, the object of so much contention, was gone. But more than that, my illusion of innocence, my belief in my own righteousness, was shattered. The storm Amelia had brewed had indeed unleashed its full fury, and I, along with Eleanor, was caught in its devastating path. The vindication Amelia sought, for her father's memory and her own, was complete. But for me it was the bitter taste of justice, a consequence I had never truly believed I would face. The silence in the room was deafening, punctuated only by the frantic pounding of my own heart. Amelia's words, sharp and precise, had sliced through the air, leaving a trail of undeniable truth in their wake. My world, once so carefully constructed on a foundation of convenience and denial, crumbled around me. I stared at the papers, the ink on the page blurring through a sudden film of tears. My father's will, a document I had dismissed as an outdated formality, now screamed a different reality. The villa, the one I believed was rightfully mine through some twisted logic, was never truly within my grasp. It had always been Amelia's, designated for her from the start, a testament to a love I had never fully comprehended. My mother, Eleanor, sat beside me, her face a mask of shame and defeat. Her usual air of calculated composure had evaporated, replaced by a hollow emptiness. She looked older, smaller, as if the weight of her deception had finally crushed her spirit. I saw the tremor in her hands as she clutched her own copy of the will, her eyes darting from the page to Amelia, then to me, a silent plea for understanding or perhaps forgiveness. But there was no forgiveness in Amelia's gaze, only a cold, unwavering resolve. The vindication Amelia sought, for her father's memory and her own, was complete. For me, it was the bitter taste of justice, a consequence I had never truly believed I would face. The judge's gavel had fallen, sealing my fate, but the true hammer blow came from those inheritance papers. I had spent years resenting Amelia, believing she was the favored one, the one who effortlessly received everything. The truth, however, was far more devastating. I was the one who had taken, who had manipulated, who had allowed my mother's insidious whispers to poison my perception of my own sister. The villa, the symbol of my supposed triumph, now felt like a cage, a monument to my own colossal failure. "You never truly saw me, did you, Sarah?" Amelia's voice, though quiet, resonated with a power that shook me to my core. "You only saw what you wanted to see. A stepping stone. A rival." Her words were a mirror, reflecting an ugly truth I had desperately tried to ignore. I had always measured myself against her, always felt a need to surpass her, to prove my worth. My entire life had been a desperate scramble for validation, fueled by a deep-seated insecurity I refused to acknowledge, and in that pursuit, I had sacrificed the one genuine connection I had. Eleanor finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Sarah, I thought I was protecting you. I thought it was what your father would have wanted." The lie hung heavy in the air, a flimsy veil over years of calculated favoritism. I knew deep down that her actions had been driven by her own unresolved issues, her own resentments towards Amelia's father, my stepfather. She had weaponized my insecurities, turning me into a pawn in her own twisted game. But blaming her now felt like a cop-out. I was an adult. I had made my own choices. I had chosen to believe the narrative that served me, the one that absolved me of responsibility. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. All the years of resentment, the bitterness, the carefully constructed facade of victimhood, it was all a lie. I was not the wronged party, I was the perpetrator. The villa, the symbol of my supposed triumph, now felt like a monument to my own colossal failure. The victory I had so desperately craved felt hollow, a barren wasteland of regret. As Amelia stood to leave, her gaze lingered on me, not with triumph, but with a profound sadness. "I hope, Sarah," she said, her voice laced with a weariness that spoke of years of unspoken pain, "that one day you can truly see what you've lost." And then she was gone, leaving Eleanor and me in the wreckage of our own making. The silence returned, heavier this time, pregnant with unspoken accusations and the bitter taste of a truth I could no longer deny. The villa, now officially Amelia's, felt like a gaping void, a constant reminder of the sister I had pushed away, the family I had fractured, and the person I had become. The path to redemption, if one even existed, stretched out before me, long and arduous. But for the first time in my life, I felt a flicker of something new, something raw and uncomfortable, the dawning realization that perhaps, just perhaps, I needed to face myself, truly face myself, before I could ever hope to heal. The bitter taste of justice, a consequence I had never truly believed I would face, was a heavy burden, but it was also, strangely, a beginning. The silence in the opulent living room was deafening, broken only by the rustle of the inheritance papers in my hand. My mother, usually so composed, looked utterly bewildered, her eyes darting between me, my sister, and the legal documents that lay scattered on the polished mahogany table. The villa, the very symbol of her favoritism and my lifelong resentment, was now a legal battleground. "What is this, Sarah?" she finally managed, her voice a strained whisper. "What are you talking about?" I met her gaze, a lifetime of suppressed anger and hurt bubbling to the surface. "These are the original inheritance papers, Mom, the ones Grandma actually signed. Not the altered version you presented to me in the family." I watched as a flicker of recognition, then dawning horror crossed her face. My sister, Clara, still clutching her celebratory champagne flute, looked equally confused, then indignant. "Altered? What are you implying?" Clara demanded, her voice sharp, a stark contrast to her usual saccharine sweetness. I took a deep breath, the moment I had envisioned for so long finally arriving. "I'm implying, Clara, that this villa, this entire estate, was never truly meant for you. It was always meant for me." I laid out the meticulously gathered evidence, the original will, dated years before Grandma's passing, witnessed by her most trusted attorney, and a signed affidavit from that same attorney, detailing how my mother had approached him to draft a new will, attempting to cut me out entirely. He had refused, citing his ethical obligations and Grandma's explicit wishes. My mother, in a desperate attempt to secure the villa for Clara, had then, it seemed, forged a new document herself. The color drained from my mother's face as she saw the attorney's notarized statement. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the raw fear beneath. Clara, however, remained defiant. "This is a lie! You're just trying to steal what's mine!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "What's yours?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "What's yours, Clara, is a lifetime of undeserved privilege, handed to you on a silver platter by a mother who believed you could do no wrong. While I, your own sister, was cast aside, deemed unworthy of even a shred of our grandmother's legacy." My mother finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "Sarah, please, this isn't how it looks." "Oh, but it is, Mom," I countered, my voice unwavering. "It looks exactly like you tried to defraud me, to steal what was rightfully mine, all to feed your endless favoritism for Clara. It looks like a betrayal that runs so deep it makes me question every memory, every kind word you ever offered." The air crackled with tension. Clara, realizing the gravity of the situation, finally lowered her champagne glass, her eyes wide with shock. The dream of her lavish future, funded by my grandmother's villa, was dissolving before her very eyes. "The attorney who drafted Grandma's original will is prepared to testify," I continued, my voice steady, as is the handwriting expert who confirmed the forgery on the new will. "You have two choices, Mom. We can either settle this amicably, with the villa reverting to its rightful owner, or we can take this to court. And believe me, Mom, I have nothing left to lose." My mother looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time in years. She saw not the compliant, overlooked daughter, but a woman hardened by her betrayal, armed with truth and a fierce desire for justice. The power had shifted. The villa, once a symbol of her control, was now her undoing. She finally nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "No court," she whispered, her voice broken. "No court, Sarah." A wave of exhaustion washed over me, but beneath it, a profound sense of relief. It wasn't the joyous triumph I might have once imagined. Instead, it was a bittersweet victory. The villa would be mine, yes, but the cost of achieving that justice was the shattering of my family, a family that had been fractured long before this day. As I walked out of that house, leaving my mother and sister to face the wreckage of their deception, I knew I had found my closure. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was an honest one, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt truly free.